Hello, I'm Dave Harris, chaplain at Cornwall Manor, with the second message in the Lenten series. I want to bring you a hymn that offers me the gift of wow. Here, listen a moment. Maybe you'll recognize it. Divine, what hast thou done? That's a wonderful Charles Wesley hymn. One of my favorite Lenten hymns. It gives me the gift of wow. It starts with, O love divine. That hooks me right in. Charles Wesley was a stellar poet, known for his poetry. And in that phrase, and in the verses of this hymn found on page 287 in the United Methodist Hymnal, I hear echoes of John 3:16. God loved me so much and you so much that God gave everything. I hear reflections of Luke's gospel as Jesus set his face towards Jerusalem, determined, persevering on a mission. I hear Jesus in Matthew 26 at the Last Supper, taking the bread and the cup and saying, it's my body and my blood. Just like in John, he said, I am the bread of life. And in John 17, he prayed that his disciples might be one, that you and I might be a part of that. And that gift of wow begins to knit together, for me, a picture of trusting God's kingdom. That big picture that is bigger than the pieces that I might hold. And for me, trust is an invitation. It's not a forced march. It's not a requirement. It's not even a commandment. It's love divine saying, I'm here for you. Now, whether it's Charles Wesley's theology and hymn or my own interpretation, I'm not under the illusion that we'll all agree on the interpretive details and theology of how Christ on the cross works or how we connect to God's redeeming grace. But, and I know that the church for 2,000 years hasn't accomplished that. What I do know is that we can all experience the love and awe and gratitude and wonder Wesley captures in O Love Divine. O Love Divine, what hast thou done? And then he ends the verse, my Lord, my love is crucified. He ends each of the three verses with that phrase and brings us back to an experience of love. And that, friends, is the wow. It can include us all, no matter our interpretive framework, our theological nuances, whether we see it all very clearly in black and white or we're much less precise. To use one of Wesley's own phrases from the hymn Love Divine, All Loves Excelling, we can be in this love divine lost in wonder, love, and praise. And our author starts by wrapping this mystery in God's grace. And then he continues to layer on the audaciously big love of God. But there's more than a first verse. He doubles back to this story of God's redeeming love. This first verse, "O love divine, what hast thou done?" It talks about what God does and did, an event. But then verse 2 starts to talk about purpose. "Is crucified for me and you to bring us rebels back to God," and ends, "My Lord, my love is crucified." A purpose to love and forgive and include. Maybe you have other words that come to mind. The story continues in verse 3, where Charles shares and invites us to share the bread of life that is blessed and broken and shared. He says, "Behold him, all ye that pass by. Come, feel his blood applied. My Lord, my love is crucified." Wow. And then Wesley's poetry was partnered with Isaac Woodbury's 1850 tune, "Selina," a haunting melody. "O love divine, what hast thou done? And together, tune and poetry evoke a sadness for me, an awe of what God has done, gratitude, as Wesley's words tell the story. But there's more to the story. There's backstory to what was going on. Because you see, this hymn written in 1742, when Wesley was 35, started before this. Because he's writing about this experience of God's divine love. And in 1735, he and his brother John got aboard the ship the Simmons with General Oglethorpe. And they sailed from England to Savannah, Georgia. They had hoped to make a difference in the New World. Oglethorpe was coming to experiment a little differently, how England could interact, less overpowering perhaps. Charles came as his secretary, but with a secondary mission in mind of evangelism to the Native Americans. And John, that was his primary mission, and he served as chaplain on that voyage. But a year later, with all their seminary training, with all their knowledge and their youthful enthusiasm, by 1736, they felt they failed miserably in this experiment of evangelism. Home for a few brief years in 1738, both John and Charles, very close together, had a conversion experience. John wrote of his in his journal, "I felt my heart strangely warmed." And in the warmth of that experience, they began to grow in their faith, not just head, but heart. The wow of their faith began to grow beyond simple knowledge. And at age 35, 1742, 4 years later, Charles wrote this hymn. He wrote it for the newly established Methodist Society in Newcastle, the first one in Newcastle. It's interesting that as his heart of faith developed, it wasn't until 7 years later when he was 42 that his heart made room for marriage to Sarah Gwynn. That's not really a part of our story, but it seems to be a part of what God was doing. See, O love divine, Charles Hymn went from, I think about my faith, to wow. Can you hear that transition, that movement? And many of Charles' hymns were used for devotion, for heart more than head. John made up for the two of them, writing sermons and many other learning materials for circuit riding pastors and others to learn. It makes me wonder as I share my favorite hymn and this gift of wow, O love divine, what hast thou done, my love? My Lord is crucified. I wonder what helps move you from a faith of the head to a faith of the heart this Lent. Amen.